We're actually going to start rolling a video. The fiction winner for this year's contest lives in Paris, where it is currently nighttime. And he's got a family and other things going on. So he recorded a 6-minute segment from his winning story that we're going to play for you, and then we'll move on to our in-person readers. So please keep eating, chatting minimally, but do your thing, and enjoy a piece of Noah's winning story, which I will read Alex Jennings' comments, who's in Chicago, who also did not make it. He was the judge. I'll read the set about the piece right afterwards.
Hi everyone, I'm Noah Weiss, and I'm going to read an excerpt of my short story, The Silo. I'll be reading apart from the middle of the story, so to give some background, the main character is named Harold Grumsby, and he works for a prestigious New York literary journal named the Feather Duster Review. He receives a follow-up email from a writer asking about a short story submission that she mailed in a year ago, and he has the sense that this is a talented writer, but has no idea where her submission has gone. So he consults his boss, who lets him in on some top secret information. The paper submissions are all sent to a mysterious compound in the Sonoran Desert known as the Silo. The next day, Harold stepped out of the Tucson airport into the dust-caked pickup truck of Tony Smothers. With his cowboy hat, aviator sunglasses, and unbuttoned green flannel shirt, Tony looked more like a grad student in field archaeology than fiction writing. Collected Grumsby, he reported into a walkie-talkie as he sped down the highway. Expected time of arrival, 2:27 p.m. Meet me at entry B7 with the paperwork. Roger, a voice crackled back. It was a nearly 3-hour drive. Smothers spent most of it describing his MFA thesis, an almost finished 200,000-word multi-POV Bildungsroman he'd been slaving over for 14 years. The plot involved a handful of bitter young writers with traumatic pasts who enter a blood pact to destroy each other if they don't complete their manuscripts by the end of the year. There was a subplot about a protein shake influencer conspiracy and a series of interspersed lyrical vignettes on fire-bellied toads. At heart, Tony said, it was a postmodern retelling of Macbeth. Harold emitted interested mutters every 10 minutes or so. About halfway through part the second, chapter 28, the road beneath them disintegrated into sandy gravel pockmarked with bathtub-sized potholes. The pickup rattled, tipped, dipped, and quaked like a rapidly boiling egg. It seemed to have the suspension of a grocery cart. Worse still, its fuel gauge was broken and stuck perpetually at empty. Harold watched the monstrously tentacled organ pipe cactuses fly by the windows in a fruitless attempt to distract himself from the certainty that they'd run out of gas any second now and be devoured by wolves, bears, or whatever vile creatures roamed this burning wasteland. He had not read any stories set in the Sonoran Desert, not even any fairy tales. At last, they rumbled through an open metal gate and ground to a halt at a tiny toll booth. When the cloud of sand and dust cleared, a frizzy-haired young woman in what looked like a blue scuba suit stepped out holding a clipboard. She hopped into the back seat and slammed the door. Howdy, she said to Harold, leaning forward. Avery Sanders. I'm the head slush reader for Feather Duster. I'm going to need you to sign this safety waiver and our non-disclosure agreement. Safety waiver? Harold said, taking the clipboard. As he tried to read the tiny print, Tony gunned the engine and they shot past the booth. Within a few minutes, they crested a steep, rocky hill, and suddenly there it was, jutting skyward from a bowl-like, succulent, speckled valley, the Silo. A windowless, cylindrical tower of pale concrete, it was far taller than Harold's 24-story apartment building. Its only entrance seemed to be a small arch at the bottom, which connected to a narrow, bulging concrete ring around the base of the tower. Tony steered the jangling pickup toward it. Is it entirely full of paper? Harold managed. Not entirely, Avery answered. There's a bit of room near the ceiling. And the submissions, they're filed by date, I assume? Nah, said Avery. I mean, loosely, of course, since we drop each new batch in from the top, but there isn't a formal filing system or anything like that. You mean... Harold couldn't even finish his sentence. Oh, come on, said Avery. How much do you think we get paid for this? Inside the curved lobby of the Silo, overly air-conditioned and poorly lit, Tony sat down at a small desk, pulled a laptop from his messenger bag, and began working on part the fourth, Chapter 79. Harold, meanwhile, was ordered to wrestle his limbs into a blue suit like Avery's. On closer inspection, it had the elasticity and coverage of a wetsuit, but the rough durability of a firefighter's uniform. Before he'd even gotten his arms in, Avery tossed him a pair of garden gloves, a headlamp, a scuba mask, flippers, and a small oxygen tank attached to a backpack. See that? She said, when Harold finally had everything on. He'd had to swap his glasses for contact lenses to get the mask to fit. He followed her pointing finger and spotted a small rectangular crack in the concrete wall beside Tony's desk, a few inches above the floor, like a mail slot. That's where we pull submissions from, she said. You just reach in and grab one. Slots and desks like that are stationed all around the bottom of the tower. There's a dozen of us here during peak season. How old are the subs at the bottom? Harold asked hesitantly. Oh, we threw a party last June because we finally made it to the year 2000. Harold digested this information. But let's say you dig up a gem in there. By the time you read it, wouldn't it already have been published elsewhere? She shrugged. I did find a Jhumpa Lahiri sub last year that I wrote a really good paper on in high school, but it's not like it happens often. We only send HQ 3 or 4 stories a year anyway. The rest we toss in the compost heap out back. Up we go. She shepherded Harold, who could do little more than waddle beneath the weight of all his gear, into an elevator. Remind me of the piece you're looking for? The Cranberries, he squeaked as they rode up, by Madeline Oliver. Arrived just about a year ago. A baby, she said, nodding. In that case, we're aiming for a depth of about 20 feet. Thank you so much for listening.
Anthology, which will come out and we'll debut it at next year's Patty Friedmann, and words of Patty Friedmann Writing Contest, reading, and anthology launch, which will be a part of next year's Words Music Festival. So many words. Okay, so what Alex Jennings wrote about Noah's piece was, the silo is a short but sweet literary satire that punches above its weight and leaves a lasting impression. The prose is crisp, immediate, and as fresh as its approach. Its characterization is also deft, using perfectly positioned detail. So Noah is our 2025 winner of the fiction contest. All right, yeah. To kick off our in-person reading, we are starting with our high school winners. So this year we had Fitzpatrick as our judge for the high school contest. And he chose Sia Moon's piece as the winner for this year, and Sia is with us today. So I'm going to read Sia's bio and then also Danny's remarks about Sia's piece. Danny said, great art always seems to have the capacity to make us less sure of ourselves, to shake us free for a moment of our ordinary ways of being in the world so that our own selves and radical selfhood of those around us become briefly more real. In this sense, Blessed Be presents a phenomenal artistic achievement. Its incisive descriptions, its frank observations of loss and abandonment, its keen deployment of language, lead on ineluctably from grief to grief, from beauty to beauty, leaving us convinced anew of our own frailty, but also somehow of the possibility of hope. Sia Moon is a young New Orleans-based writer. Her writing has been featured in the Uonia Review, NCEAASA Daily Conference Online, Fifth Wheel Press, Chewers, and other online publications. In print, her work can be found in Unbound and upcoming in A Split Self. Her words, which reveal both the visceral and the invisible, are occasionally award-winning, and she is a 2025 Sundress Publications Best of the Net nominee. Her winning poem will be in next year's anthology. Please give it up for Sia Moon.
We go to church across the bay on Sunday. The church is Greek Orthodox, sister to Russian Orthodoxy. There is no Russian church near our suburb in Alabama. My mother wears a scarf over her head and spends an extra long time lighting candles in the narthex. She gazes through the glass, past rows of wooden pews at the large mosaic of the Mother Mary, clad in a bright blue robe. On her lap sits a baby Jesus. Red and green circle both of their heads, signifying sanctity. Tears drop into the sandbox where crosses are drawn and candles are planted before we lower our gazes and enter the nave for the Divine Liturgy. At the end of service, we fold out velvet knee rests from the pews before us and kneel to pray. Our priest, a bearded old man, chants the forthcoming and swings a gold vigil lamp with burning oil as the congregation stills. I focus. I have much to pray for. I clasp my hands together, trembling on my knees. I ask that Alapana be blessed in heaven. I ask that my mother feel better soon. I ask for closeness with my extended family. After church ends, we trail behind the congregation, making its way to the social hall. My mother exchanges hugs and kisses with her Russian girlfriends, who greet her with their condolences. She is quieter than usual, but stops to gossip and sip coffee for a moment before pulling my sister and I away from the rampaging church kids. The ride home is a silent rush over the causeway. We fly down Battleship Parkway, past the stilted oyster houses with beach volleyball courts, past the rusted old battleship stuffed with relics of American victory, past the fishing boats on the murky Mobile River Delta. Our typical Sunday playlist, a mix of Russian and American pop artists, Musha and Avril Lavigne, is on pause. When living in an American suburb, any important destination requires a commute. As I fly co-pilot with my mother, my sister battling in the back, I wonder how strange it feels for her. A long drive across the river every Sunday, when she grew up walking to church. In a compact Siberian town, church services were down the block from my mother's house, and her best friend lived in the house next to her own. Their windows opened into each other's rooms, and they strung up clever wire to deliver messages. My mother, Alexei, and their older brother would sneak over to the neighbor's house to watch cartoons, often when they were supposed to be keeping an eye on the horses. How different those days were from her life now, in pristine suburbia, surrounded by distant, white-faced neighbors who peeped through their gates at us, the strange family on the bend. I only knew a few of my neighbors, the sweet girl close to my age, and a group of scampish brothers. We occasionally played in the backwoods together, or biked through the hills of the neighborhood. Only when I grew older would I notice the scorn in the eyes of my white neighbors' parents when they looked at me. The mischievous daughter of the neighborhood's only black man, the un-American child of the abrasive immigrant, the skinny brown flash on the playground. After 2018, we stopped visiting my mother's family. A trip through pandemic and war was unlikely. It wouldn't be 5 years until I saw my family again, but I would not see my uncle. I stopped going to church. My avoidance was partially out of spite. As I grew older and more distant from my mother, I grew to hate everything the church represented. I thought myself a wicked, profane pagan who would be persecuted upon entry, a cloaked figure in the corner, a hunched back in the social hall, an evil terror to the church kids. In that time, we moved to New Orleans. My mom had fallen out of the church-going habit after COVID, but occasionally attended a small Greek Orthodox church overlooking the lakeside canal. I didn't return to church until my mother pulled me out of school one day in the 9th grade. My mother had told me that morning that her brother's health was in the gutter. She had a flight booked to Russia, and she was leaving that day. After she checked me out of class, we ended up not at the Kenner Airport tens of miles away, but the small church on the canal. I spoke sheepishly on the steps of the church as my mother and sister entered through the large wooden door. I'm racked with guilt, guilty of my lazy Sundays avoiding service, guilty of not calling my grandmother, guilty of my American leisure and ignorant to the turmoil cutting through my family. I peer inside the church as my mother floats past the wooden pews to the sanctuary. The church opens not into a candled antechamber, but into the nave itself, almost identical to the one in Alabama. The altar is closed off by the gold iconostasis, which bears icons on each door-shaped panel. Angels and disciples adorn the walls, each looking towards the image of Jesus and Mother Mary on the ceiling. The lights are off, and the light from the canal glitters through stained glass portraits. The church has the same blood-red runner as the one in Alabama, running down the center aisle between the pews. I fall into old habit, walking through the nave in a straight line, watching my shoes make soft, disappearing dents in the rug. I walk slowly, one foot in front of the other, until I make it to the end, where my mother stands with a robed priest and my younger sister sits, uninterested, in the second row of pews. "Good morning, Father," I say as I approach with my right hand over my left. He extends his arm towards my forehead and makes the sign of the cross, blessing me. "This is my oldest. She's in high school," explains my mother. "Why don't you come to church?" The priest furrows his brows. "I don't know," I sigh. "What else is there to say? I'm too busy for God." He shakes his head, and I know that the conversation isn't over. I know that I will be summoned to spend my Sundays in service, my back aching from the hard-wooden pew, my head lolling from a desire to sleep. "I've come to ask for your blessing," says my mother. "I have a flight to Russia this afternoon." The priest nods at my mother, beckoning that she comes closer. She pauses. Her face is matter of fact, but her eyes gleam as she says, "My brother died today." Now it is my turn to pause. I stand slightly, silently, my eyes locked on her face as the priest begins to recite a prayer. Father's sacred words are drowned out by my self-talk as I repeat in my head, "Alexei is dead." The priest pulls a long metal rod from his robe, the aspergillum. He chants and knocks it against the air like a drumstick, sprinkling my mother with holy water, who is motionless as she is blessed. She does not weep or cry. She looks straight ahead, past Father, through the iconostasis, over the glimmering canal, towards the east. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia, and thank you for kicking us off. That was incredible. Our next high school reader is Nina Muniz. Nina's piece was a finalist in this year's contest. Nina is a Hungarian-American author whose work revolves around the subjects of cultural identity, womanhood, and sexuality. Her short stories and essays have been featured in the Weight Journal and Punk Rock. She has been shortlisted by the William Faulkner Literary Competition. She currently studies creative writing at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. Give it up for Nina.
The ending of my essay, Love Letter to Home, which is about my relationship to my ancestral home, Honduras, and how it is transformed due to grief. Even as a teenager, your silence remains and travels with you back to Attila. You are perpetually embarrassed. Embarrassed that if you open your mouth to speak, the wrong accent will come out from your foreign mouth. Embarrassed that you've sworn off pork, and that's what every dish here includes. Embarrassed that your body is too skinny and invites itself to poking and questioning by women in your family. Embarrassed that you've succumbed to the feeling of alienation and sometimes wish to go back to America sooner, though you know your isolation would be no different there. You are sensitive, pale, miserable, and full of hatred for the world you're surrounded by. You are everything a Honduran isn't supposed to be. One night spent crying, your heart aching and aching for no particular reason. You comforted yourself by looking through old photographs at your grandmother's house on the hill. Most of the pictures are of her father, whom you also lovingly refer to as Dad. Admittedly, you were a little scared of Dad. You spoke very little, and you were told he didn't like children very much, despite having around 6 of his own. Each time you had visited him, you sat by him on the porch, watching as he stared off at the stocky brick house and said nothing. You were unsure of how to break the silence between the two of you, but wanted more than anything to do so. each picture, Dad is handsome in a way Italian men usually aren't. His appearance is very masculine, but not off-putting. He looked very different in his youth. He had the same forehead wrinkles, but his brows were black and sharp, his jaw strong and pointed, yet his solemn expression remained. You were told he was always soft-spoken, and never once raised his voice at anyone, much less a woman or child. There's a black and white photo of him in some American city, wearing a fashionable bomber jacket that looks weirdly modern. A Polaroid of him building something on a boat, where he'd go after leaving his children for 10 months at a time in order to provide for them. A portrait of him on his daughter's wedding day with a pink pocket square in his suit. His salt and pepper crown was somehow combed at least 4 inches above his head, likely due to his wife's help. A candid of him wearing a t-shirt from a toy skate shop in front of a mirror. His eyes blue and distant, his reflection lingering in the background. The sadness in your heart subsides, almost evaporating completely when looking at pictures of Dad. He is beautiful, intelligent, hardworking, and above all else, gentle. He is your own blood, and for the first time in ages, you are overcome with a sense of pride. In the early hours of the following morning, Dad is found dead. He passes buried underneath the sheets of his wife's bed, sickness finally overcoming his body. Just a week before, your other relatives came to visit, kissed him on the forehead, and whispered into ears that could hear very little, "I love you, Dad." The funeral is held later that afternoon. It is the first one you've ever been to. You step foot into a church for the first time in years, and you slip into a pew near the front and cry and cry. Though you've read numerous books about death, you've never experienced one before, and you don't understand. This isn't how the funeral is supposed to be. Nobody is wearing black. A white missionary that never knew your great-grandfather is leading the service. You can't even focus with the screeches of the choir behind you. You have never grieved before, and now you will be until you are dead too. This is the last time you have been to today. Months later, in the middle of your intro to fiction class back in America, stumped with no ideas of what you could possibly write about, the funeral miraculously makes itself onto your page. Your grief is shrouded in false details and made-up names, but generally follows the same events you went through. You'll feel that same sense of pride that came over you when you were looking at those old photographs of Dad. You hate fiction, but you wrote it. It won some awards and was published in some places. You are a writer now. You have always wanted to be one, and now it's your reality. Your reality eventually turns you to shame. You are ashamed that you have taken something tragic and morphed it into something entirely about yourself, a death only visible through your lens. You don't know how to feel, how to write, or in what way you should be within your grief. You won't write about Utila again until now. More time has passed and has taken more people with it. Your great-grandfather's dog and then his wife. Someone told you once that people always come and go in threes. You are grateful that they died in Honduras amongst the hills and beaches, not in the climate, fluorescent rooms of an American hospital. You haven't been back since their passing, and you're not sure when or if you will return. Death has left you permanently homesick for a place where your strange accent, sickly-looking body, perpetual embarrassment, and rage should still be embraced by the sun-spotted, saggy arms of your elders. You hope to return to this one day, no matter how impossible it seems for now. You hope to return to the fish and to the sea, to the brujas and borrachos, to sweat and desperation, to the giggles and stretches of newborns, to mangoes and lobsters, to the church and school bells ringing, to the calling of Utila, the only place you may ever know is home. In an imagined future, that's exactly what it becomes. Home. You don't question it, it just is. You have no husband, but a beautiful daughter that is somehow materialized. Your mother has grown to be one of those 103-year-old women and your kid brother and older sister live just a hill over. Your daughter is delicate and smart and reads a novel with her head in your lap. You rub her curls between your index and thumb and let out a long-awaited sigh of relief. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Next, I actually have the pleasure of introducing Annell Lopez, who was our judge for the Beyond Bars contest, and she's going to introduce the winner. Give it up for Annell.
Hi everyone, can you guys hear me okay? Excellent. I love this festival and I love everything that's being read so far. And I had the pleasure of judging the Justice Impacted Youth Writing Contest. And the winner is The Family Tree by Fitzpatrick. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Did I say that right? Fitzpatrick? So here's what I wrote about The Family Tree, which I love reading. Full of heart and rhythm, the verses in The Family Tree tell a story of systemic oppression and perseverance. The speaker of the poem addresses multiple family members with the love, empathy, and compassion of someone who understands the far-reaching impact of incarceration. Specifically, the emotional toll on those waiting for their loved ones to come home. The poem's reflective tone turns hopeful as the speaker reveals his desire to reconnect with his family. Assertive and poignant, The Family Tree is a beautiful poem. Thank you and congratulations.
How y'all doing? I got a lot. I got a lot when I'm 14. I get mad because I know I was doing the wrong thing. And choose life, it chose me. I remember when the judge gave me to my 18. My grandma, my mama dropped to their knee. They lost their son and grandson into the street. Sometimes I just think it's a common part of the century, and most of us don't make it 621. And nowadays, our youngest under 12 don't own a gun. A couple months ago, a woman named Tiffany lost her only son, according to statistics from a father of the one. The police locked him up even though he wasn't one-on-one. The young 6-month son, carried by my child as a friend, and took his life in his own hand and got labeled suicide. No one laughed, sometimes I want to cry, but I put a smile on my face and had pain in my eye. Even though it's time to give him love, I still try, because I come from a struggle with a single mother, with a sister and their brother. Even though we had different fathers, instead of the other half, we were rock one, I'm not complete. I'm not mad at my papa being dead, provide a seed and still want to be a family tree. Even though it's still time, I had around, my heart is still I love him. I pop out my nana, I didn't know, me probably feel alone. So when I come home, I'm doing some coming. I miss my first love, and I ain't mean for the big love, but I still understand what she's doing. The life I live is hard. Yeah, what could I say? This is high school. It runs in the family tree.
Thank you. Next, we're going to transition to our creative nonfiction runners-up and winner. Brooke Champagne, did she end up coming to the festival? She's just not here right now, or?
She'll be here at 3:50.
Okay. So Brooke Champagne will be here later. And you all, if you stick around to be able to meet her, she's incredible. She was our judge for the creative nonfiction contest this year. She picked 2 runners-up, and they are both with us today. The first runner-up she chose was called The Halloween Cannot Be Stopped by Deborah Levy-Perlman. I asked you how to pronounce her name, did I pronounce it wrong? I didn't. You shook your head yes, didn't give me a thumbs up, so it's good. I'm just gonna keep going. Okay, I'm sorry. Deborah Levy-Perlman is a writer, poet, and community organizer. Her poems have appeared in Wild Blue Journal, Disco Kitchen Magazine, and Poets Reading News. Her nonfiction essay, The Halloween Can't Be Stopped, is forthcoming in the next liminal anthology. Born and raised in California, she has lived in New Orleans since 2018. Give it up for Deborah.
You had it right the first time, Nikki, Devorah. So yeah, you were good. Well, this is exciting to hear and speak, read amongst so many wonderful writers today. It's really a joy. So this essay is The Halloween Cannot Be Stopped. Part 1. I scan from one end of the country to the other where the weeds of Americana spur. A nebulous haze settles on the horizon. West Texas' rolling plains stretch out their vast limbs for miles, straining for something larger than themselves. You can look across the desert, but never through it. This colossus of land overwhelms. A cavern inside me widens, a labyrinth forms. I stop at the Texaco station off Route 20. At the corner, I meet the eyes of a frail white man in a Clint Eastwood-esque brim hat. I dig to the bottom well of my purse, hunting for scavenged dimes. The rancher man insists on showing me, his sole customer on this quiet Monday afternoon, a cryptic coin trick. 2 wrinkled fists lie on the table. The quarter vanishes from his right hand, then reappears at his left. I think of the gas station scene in No Country for Old Men, when Javier Bardem's psychopathic killer, Anton, barges into a dingy roadside gas station like this one, also in West Texas. He challenges a suspenders-clad store owner to a morbid coin toss. Heads, he walks away. Tails, it's the last game he'll ever play. The coin lands on heads, granting the store owner another day of life. But the scene posits the 2 opposite poles on the universal continuum, existence and annihilation, not as estranged non-entities, but as a pair of sturdy pillars holding up the earth. Sometimes you draw heads, sometimes tails, but fate ensnares you either way. This life a merciless die roll, a helter-skelter chain link of inexplicable causality which claims no victors. I leave the store with a pack of yellow spirits in one hand and a cockroach-sized bag of salty peanuts in the other. I squeegee a coat of dust off my road-weird windshield. I read somewhere that every year, strong winds blow mammoth sand plumes off the Saharan desert and carry them across the Atlantic. By July, the same dust particles make landfall in Texas and form dense walls in our atmosphere. With time, the dust walls become fully fledged dust storms, a source of asthmatic episodes and breathtaking fuchsia sunsets. My eyes linger on the freeway, the 1,800 miles between New Orleans and LA. This maze of asphalt will steer me home, this American constellation which now eclipses the stars. The American road trip has long been drained of its illusions, its good old boys optimism, that unfurling lasso of possibility where homemade guitars were named after lonesome women and lost men took 6 shifts on moonshine rides through desert storms. I cruise control numbly past dreary boomtowns gone bust, a flicker of ranches crammed with slaughter-collared cattle, the icy steel scaffolding of borderland checkpoints. I pass convenience stores speckled with bullet holes and vacant roadside motels and lots of smashed glass. I cannot place where I stand in this smoking gun of a country. I hear only a low vibrato hum of imperceptible frequency. I've driven my grandfather's Toyota Camry 25,000 miles since he died. I hit the gas with a force he would never tolerate. I am a distracted, playlist shuffling driver. My grandfather approached driving as he did his long life, slow and measured. He was a disciplined man, a World War II Navy veteran who fixed engines on ships he never spoke of again. He never arrived late or missed an appointment. He had no patience for the random or spontaneous. Even in retirement, he awoke at 6 a.m. every morning without an alarm. I once asked him how he did it. He told me he would lay in bed every night and mutter softly to himself in the darkness. I will wake up at 6 o'clock. I will wake up at 6 o'clock. It worked every time. He was a devotee of one philosophy, doing things the way they ought to be done. He kept time on a short leash. He adhered to the conventions of duty and responsibility as a biblical devotee adheres to the commandments. He was born in 1925 in an epoch of control, when certain people still held a measure of faith in the lore of things working themselves out. There was a formula to success. The veneer of so-called hard work was taken formulaically. If you studied the formula, you could expect to get the right answer. Today I drove for 7 hours, and tomorrow I will drive 9 more. This would have made my grandfather sick with nerves. His granddaughter, a 5', 20-something woman, tearing across the country alone in his car. But I feel no danger. I feel secure, even serene. I sink into the groundlessness of the movement, the road below carrying me where I ought to go. At times, my eyelids start to turn in. I turn to curated playlists, my generational calling card. I shift rapidly between genres like a drunk driver spinning between lanes. Dylan, James Brown, Prince, Vicente Fernandez, Dolly Parton, ambient birdsong. I hum the classic American road trip canon, Neil Young, Tom Petty, Johnny Cash's greatest hits. I nudge the gears of the algorithm. With the careless flick of a forefinger, I could be transported anywhere. At dusk, El Paso unfolds like a movie reel. The city teeters on all edges. Flanked on every side like a medieval fortress, El Paso, the steppe, is defined by its borders, both man-made and organic. The Mexican, the American, the mountain range, slicing and hoisting up the city like a wooden palito piercing through an icy paleta. I pass the city's glittery megamalls, their wide-beam prisons spraying out light like pesticides, smothering every patch of land as if darkness were an offense, a blemish to be blotted out. El Paso looms over its sister city, Ciudad Juarez, its conquered counterpart. To my right, pixelated billboards blink back dumbly, monotonous like smoke detectors. To my left, in Mexico, sagging power lines broke the inclines of hillside slums. Collapsed rooftops carve out jagged lines in the sky like crooked smile constellations. This is the border of headlines. Cartel operatives, cocaine trafficking rings, asylum seekers crossing the Paso del Norte Bridge. The desert is long but adjudicated on moral terms and portrayed as a brutal alien site of violence. Dramatic duels between the polar forces of good and evil. John Wayne and his herd of messianic cowboys charging at the enemy Indians. Rapacious gold rush schemers, ear-ringing gunshots rippling with ominous bravado over sand dunes. Before I realize it, the landscape has run out of my hands. I am close, but nowhere near touching it. I'm almost halfway home. New Orleans trickles further behind the huge rumble of the gas. Blue lit maps delineate the distance between point A and B. I sit and drive, no longer bound to either home. I float throughout the unruly limbo, a staggering liminal space between solid lines. I keep my eyes on the dog-white line as it lowers into my rearview mirror like a slowly shutting eyelid. The mere observer of I is smothered to the ground, and all that's left to swallow is sky. These maps don't offer a blueprint of recourse, only a vague trajectory, only stars and sand and the act of seeing. Part 2. Blotches of nebula float wholly and untethered like the disembodied blobs of rock-closed rectangles. Just outside Santa Fe, I stopped to look at the rock formations. Rust, beige, and uncanny rose pink folding into each other. Color droops from the cliff like paint peeling from a palette. The bodies of shadows lean sideways,
sloping the lower crest of the crag's belly as the day tilts toward late afternoon. I take a photo of this alien rock and the sun looming behind it. But no matter which angle I try, the resulting photo is so narrow, compressed tight in its four corners. It resembles nothing of the width of feeling, the surrender to horizon I set out to capture. I used to spend hours sleeping in the backseat of cars. I remember how effortless it was to be carried, bobbing along to the rhythm of the land beneath me. 9 years old, after a long day at summer camp, my fingertips stained blue from the inks and drawing class. My grandfather sliding Sinatra CDs into the sedan stereo. My grandfather and I would wade through the July heat and drive to the northern outskirts of Fresno, where plum orchards bombed the harsh interstates, where concrete poured into long country roads and the city faded to a mirage. We passed the dam and its artificial lake tucked behind the Madera foothills, glide past the children's hospital, past the trail of produce stands with their neat bed of ripe nectarines and pesticide cherries. We put acres between us and home, seeking respite from the scorching valley heat and the hallways we weren't ready to walk down. I drive by the U.S.-Mexico border as yellow sun streaks smear my front windshield. The guide signs flash their emerald green warnings, blurting out the miles as they scatter the cement like crinkled dollar bills. Impressions of life skip by like film reels. The acidic odor of burning tires in the scrapyard, the strung-out shrieks of blazing neon truck stops, the slow, condescending blink of stoplights interrupting small towns. I punch Old dizzily through state lines. The machine makes uneasy contact with the ground below. It hardly scrapes against life, and nothing ever calls back in response. I was 21 when I left California. What have I done since then other than a series of pirouettes, lukewarm jogs, deja vu conversations, the same neighborhood loop through the same intersection? I find myself in a dizzying circuit of words that mutate only slightly with each replication. Every machine must eventually come unhinged. Cars accelerate on either side of me. A scowling pickup truck with Texas plates and high beams tails my rear, nearly nipping my bumper before tearing into the passing lane. I have my reasons for being careful. There are still some living family members who feel some connection to me, enough to offer up a spare room in the hilltop house overlooking the sea. I have a screenshot of a cousin's address and text messages concluding in sharp periods. I could have flown, but I chose to drive, to peel off the stickiness of skin, to de-loop this tape. I drive my grandpa's car, a newer model of the same Camry he traded in a year before dying, like he knew I wanted. It's black and still runs on his battery. I'm tangled up in this land, though I only half belong to it. I dangle like a loose prop over the I-10, the metallic shell of my car hovering over the concrete plastered over earth. For now, I have only one task, to exist between parallel white lines. I've entrusted my warm flesh to this unfeeling machine, these steel armor barracks where I levitate between towns, but never within them, each place an artery without a pulse. The southwest landscape strips down, naked and startling. I cross 100-mile pockets with only a single gas station. My eyes fixate on a distant hill that always appears closer than it is. I follow the empty hollow, offer myself to the uncharted distance, where time breaks off and the past cannot intervene. The calderas, the scrub brush, the stratum, the sinkhole. Here I am. Not the roommate last week who spilled tea on the sofa. Not the woman who frantically rearranged bar stools around the kitchen island. The limestone caverns once began as blocks before the acid opened up their pores and dissolved along harsh folds to uncover new doors, new points of entry, new portals, new patterns. Once the holes started growing, the hollowing couldn't be stopped. The sensor picks up the asphalt, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun dares us to breathe through it, challenges us to penetrate its ornery core. I must surrender to this fever, like a melting ice cream cone conceding the liquid. The substance is transformed, and yet it survives, having absorbed the energy surrounding it. I stop in the town square of adobe blocks and take a seat at a cantina in an 18th century stagecoach station. The menu claims Billy the Kid was once a frequent visitor to town. I wonder if he too was enchanted by the red rocks and the watermelon sunsets over the Sangre de Cristo. I order an orange juice margarita, and later I crash on the couch of a friend in an adobe one-bedroom on a 1 avenue of all adobe one-bedrooms. The next morning, I wake up at 6, resume the motion, and drive 300 more miles. If my grandpa were driving, he would have driven painfully slowly, and we might have argued about it, and I would have heard the quivering rasp rise in his voice, the breakage that signaled a collapse into anger. I would have known when to shut my mouth, or perhaps not, and he would say, "I'm sorry, you know your grandpa's a grumpy old man." And I would sense the ringing in his voice, the rattling of all the years he held inside him. I can see him, stern face, finger wagging, as he was when he taught me how to drive, roaring, "Hey, slow down, you forgot the turn signal. Listen, why don't you listen to me?" He'd say you need to learn these things so you can manage when we're gone. When we're gone. Soon he and my grandmother gone. Soon no one to drive me. I was not permitted to forget this. Every other sentence prefaced with a "when we're gone." The spiral began years ago, with adoption papers signed in their 70s until reaching its inevitable end. At an anticlimax, I found myself in a gray room of blinding fluorescence, scribbling my initials under the probate to the will. It was in the back seat of my grandpa's car, behind the fresh sting of summer seatbelt, when I'd shut my eyes, scrunch my cheek into my palm, one leg still resting on the dashboard, and melt into the black mush. The engine's white noise would lull me asleep as I slipped into a warm, dark place, and I didn't think of anyone I loved dying. I tinker with the radio, hoping for a spark of consolation amongst the static. Eventually, I resign myself to silence. I observe the quiet, the space it commands. I watch as this noiselessness balloons, swelling until it gathers the courage to speak. If I listen closely enough inside the expanding pressure of air, I can hear numerous voices. I observe my own figure before me like a shadow puppet blinking on the night wall, a dancing imprint projected onto a foreground of sky. Beyond the markers of person, past the fabrics on my body, past the rolled up window, past the 4 sedan doors, past the dotted white line, past the interstate, over the width of the desert, I land in a place where the lost edges of land become invisible. I go into the whole dissolves until I am not driving and only the motion drives me forward. Thank you.
Our second runner-up is Lee Riley. Lee Riley frequently writes about women and the intricacies of family identity and care. Her work has appeared in 4 genres: Mobile Quarterly, Hippocampus, London Independent Story Prize, Swordley, Parker's Ashes, and elsewhere. And she's earned support from the Barsars Fund, Ragdale Foundation, Monsoon Arts, and other arts organizations. The author of Women Living Single and Teaching Maggie, she hosts Jennings? Jennings.
Apologies for that.
It's okay. My apologies. A residency for writers in Maine. She's here all the way from Maine, Give it up for Lee.
And it's really hot here. I arrived and I had to go to the first mall I could find because I needed a shirt. So I want to do a quick exercise. We've heard so much. And I'd like you to close your eyes and think of a friend that you have or a friend that you've lost. Okay, you can open your eyes. Just a little bit from the road, and my grandmother wants to wake up at 6. Here we go. Thank you for all this. The essay is called Value Me, and it's about friendship. It's written in fragments, so I'm going to read fragments. Here we go. Once, I handed off to her. She was the anchorman. Memorial Day races, 440 relay, 5th grade against the 6th. My father snapped the picture. I'm in focus. She's a rush, glue, and braids. And once, we huddled as wild things roared outside our tent. A coyote was ravaging chickens. Foxes were fighting over carrion. A bobcat was tearing up kittens. A coyote screeches, shrieks, blood-stopping wails. At least we don't have to pee. she said. And then, of course, I had to pee. Finally, she looked at the flap. It was raccoons. They were having sex. And once, when she poured hydrogen peroxide into her eye by mistake, I threw her into a shower at the Seattle Y and flooded her face. And once, when I lost my job, she offered me money from the sale of her house. And once, in a life already riven with losses, I chose to lose ground. How can that be? She won't answer that question. She doesn't know I'm writing this, and besides, much of the answer lies elsewhere, in the nature and structure of friendship. Friendship has a structural problem. Codes are fluid and unspoken. No one says in sickness and in health, or for richer or poor. Expectations are fluid and unspoken too, and then they're spoken. And in the speaking, something changes. And in my experience, it's the friendship that changes, never to flow with the same grace or freedom again. I'm talking about women, men, they're a different species, prone to teammates and business partners, temporary alliances, workshop leaders used to intone back in the 1980s when we women were making 67 cents on the dollar. Men do temporary alliances. You should too. The research bears this out. Men's friendships are a place for transactions and shared activity. They're not renowned for deep and voluntary disclosure. That's why Harry and Jess, best friends, and when Harry met Sally, don't huddle in a restaurant bathroom for an intimate discussion about the nature of friendship, gender, and love. Instead, they hit thoughts around in a batting cage, and the punchline is about sex. You made a woman meow? Women disclose. Their friendships envelop. They have their own weather systems, which swirl and stall, negotiating seen and unseen forces. They have beach, sand, sun. They have hurricane winds and resolution. I think of the angry and forgiving letters my mother wrote to her best friend, who lived 100 yards away. There's homeostasis. There's tensile strength. After friendship survives the 7th grade, thousands of miles of separation, job loss, mental health issues, serial romantic attachments, what's to stop it from lasting a lifetime? I'm going to nominate the fragility of unspoken rules. And I wonder, what if Fran reads this? And from here, there's contemplation on Aristotle, which you will not have to listen to, women at the forefront of labor, and also some literary friendships. So now I'm going to go back to the fragments. The raft we sank in the Hohokus Brook, depth 3 feet. The 10 minutes we spent breaking out of an Italian bordello. The time we woke to a campfire that had reignited itself. The generations of boyfriends, none of them worth keeping. The great writers are right. There's a special power resident in those times when life is being faced with joint naivete and you've never really thought about the rules of conduct. Why would you? You're still trying to learn your heart and figure out impulse. Once, we tried to reach the tunnels under the Hermitage, a Revolutionary War estate. Fran led us into the dark culvert. Water splashed, echoes bounced. Shadows careened. The teenage boys ahead of us, or were they behind, shouted, "Rats!" And Fran's newspaper torch went out. And then our giggle. Once, my father gave Fran a fruitcake, a dense, dark thing, perpetually moist. The next Christmas, she gave it back. And once, teenagers now, she grabbed the hose and sprayed him. "What the?" he bellowed. He was a man of many, many rages. I crouched in a corner. Fran dashed toward him, hosing harder. He returned fire with a spray bottle he used for grilling chicken. He was red-faced and laughing, and I was confused and intrigued. How could she dare him like that? Why was he smiling? Just a few months before, he'd thrown a radio at my head because I got a C in science. And once, I overheard a conversation. She'd be much better off if her friend wasn't Jewish, my mother said. Much better? How? My aunt demanded. Socially, Fran is a liability. Really? How can you say that? It was true. We were different creatures. Fran was forthright and a much better tomboy. She excelled at science and never wore makeup. I was a fitful Catholic girl who wanted to be pretty. Fran jollied my father. I enraged him. The nuns said Fran wouldn't get to heaven. I was still going to confession. "What do you have in common?" my mother asked. Those rumbles, those potential fissures, Fran and I didn't talk about those. We didn't dare the darknesses. I never disclosed my mother's anti-Semitism. We never talked about her grandmother with a German accent. We didn't talk about death. I didn't ask Fran, 12, 16, 24, or even 40. Tell me about your father. If I had, would Fran still be my friend?
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for coming forward with me. Sorry it's so hot. Next up, we have the winner. So I'm going to read the blurb that Brooke Champagne wrote. Becoming Baruchwa captures everything I love about the essay form. Its structure is both elegant and artfully mirrors its content, and it teaches me something, many things, about what it means to inhabit a bifurcated cultural and racial identity at this particular moment in history. This is a work thoughtfully narrated by a writer who knows her story and does some deep digging to discover what it might mean. This essay reads like a dazzling prose performance, and I was a captive audience from beginning to end. So the winner of this year's contest is Kat Echevarria Richter. Kat is an MFA candidate in creative writing at Rutgers Camden. Her work explores themes of matriarchs, Puerto Rican identity, and American historiographies, often with a side of humor. Prior to returning to school, Kat served as artistic director for the Lady Hoopers Tap Ensemble, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the art of rhythm tap. She also holds an MA in dance anthropology and has taught dance and dance studies in both the US and the UK. Her research has appeared in numerous peer-reviewed journals and edited anthologies, and her creative writing can be found in Glamour, Barsars, Apiary, and Skirt. Kat is currently working on a novel about Jennings and a memoir about the years she spent on scholarship at Oxford University, during which time she realized George Eliot is a woman. Kat lives in Philadelphia with her spouse, their child, and a neurotic but lovable rescue dog. Please give it up for Kat.
Gonna adjust this, bear with me. Like our former mayor, I too am dressed for a particularly colder climate than New York.
You've got help all the way.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Much appreciated. I would have been up there just doing that for the whole 6 minutes. All right, thank you all so much for having me. I'm going to read from the middle of my piece, and what you need to know is I'm a tap dancer. You heard that part already. I'm also Puerto Rican, but I can't speak Spanish properly. And at the end of this piece, I'm going to do a little call and response, and I hope that you will enjoy a little bit of audience participation with me. Great, thank you. Becoming Boricua. We are several months into the pandemic when I receive an email from my mother. She has purchased a Disney Plus subscription. Under ordinary circumstances, we are not Disney people, but Disney Plus is about to release Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton. We're meant to be social distancing, but my mother pulls out all the stops. She'll steam clean the entire house. She'll Lysol the couch. She'll wear a mask the whole time, and she saves the coup de grace for the last line of her email. She'll open a bottle of good wine. It's not every day, after all, that one can watch Puerto Rico's greatest son bestow his literary genius upon the masses. Mark Anthony ranks highly in my mother's book, as does Pitbull, and she's trying really hard to get into Bad Bunny because she likes his politics. But none of these men can hold a candle to Lin. She follows him on multiple social media platforms, donates to each of his fundraising campaign, and nurses a posthumous dislike of Toni Morrison on his account. Now, I delivered my son to the Hamilton soundtrack. I can quote every line, but I also invite my dance history students to join me in a little cognitive dissonance. Look how Broadway sells the American dream using the very music of those excluded from that dream. I remind my students that Hamilton wasn't actually the first hip-hop musical. That honor belongs to Savion Glover's Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. But you can't make these sort of critiques in front of my mother. She grew up before PBS Kids featured spunky Puerto Rican protagonists. She grew up surrounded by stereotypes of hoochie mamas instead of role models like Sonia Sotomayor on the Supreme Court. As such, there is no room for dissent in my mother's book. Still, I grab my mask and head across town because anything is better than another night of social distancing with a toddler. I don't hug my mother hello because my husband is high risk, and so we sit at opposite ends of the couch, watching these handsome men gallivant across the stage in their 18th century costumes until the end of Act 1, when it's time to pour more wine. Ready? My mom asks, her hand poised on the remote to begin Act 2. Yes, I tell her. Actually, no, I need to talk to you. What do you think about me changing my last name? I can't pronounce my last name. Actually, this is only half the story. My full name, Katrina Capella Echeverria Richter, comprises 13 syllables that no one can pronounce. When they try, I tell them, you know, Katrina, like the hurricane, and Richter, like the earthquake scale. But Echeverria isn't comparable to anything. Echeverria spills across the second line on my passport. Echeverria, with its rolled R and its accent on the penultimate vowel, resists the easy rhythm of a white woman's name, the kind of woman who might, I imagine, win prizes for writing literary fiction. And so, at the age of 13, I shave those 13 syllables down to 3 and adopt Cat Richter as my byline. At 22, I moved to London for grad school, partially because I'm hoping to drink a lot of Pimm's and marry a British man, partially because I'm still suffering from my own version of interpersonal racism, and partially because there are only a few dance anthropology programs in the world. Dance anthropology, as opposed to dance history, is what you have to study if you're interested in what we in the Academy call Black vernacular dance. The reason for this are the same reasons that art museums typically contain works from Europe, while those from the Global South are shunted to archaeology or anthropology museums. Now, speaking of dance history, we're going to move into the final section, call and response. If you've ever been to a black church or a political rally engineered to court the black vote, you're already familiar with the concept of call and response. If not, you'll catch on. In 1964, George Balanchine told principal ballerina Allegra Kent enough was enough when she returned to New York City Ballet after the birth of her second child. Babies, Mr. B said, are for Puerto Ricans. For this reason, Balanchine's name sits at the top of a Google Doc I've entitled, A Growing List of White Men Who Need to Be Kicked in the Balls. Also, Allegra Kent wasn't even her real name. Her real name was too Jewish. So, what to do with George Balanchine?
Put him on the list.
This will be your line. Put him on the list. There we go. My son had it. He was ready. Put him on the list. Here's another example. Ted Shawn widely considered the founding father of American modern dance, established Jacob's Pillow in 1931. He bragged of giving his students the richest and most varied fare, old, new, domestic, foreign, anything we felt that had any value. But for Sean, this did not include tap dancing. He considered tap an invention of the devil. So what should we do with Ted Sean? Put him on the list. When my abuelo's family immigrated to Nueva York around the same time as Sean's rise to fame, he could not speak English. But he was an eager student, so he smiled at his teachers. One told him to wipe that grin off his face. But my abuelo didn't know what grin meant, so he just kept right on smiling. The teacher slapped him. What should we do with that teacher? 200 years ago, Latrobe accidentally stumbled upon a group of Negroes in Congo Square. It was 1819, a Sunday afternoon. Latrobe had no clue that he was standing on hallowed ground. He described the music he heard as abominable, the dance as miserably dull. I have never seen anything, he wrote, more brutally savage. What should we do with Henry Latrobe? In more recent history, at a Trump rally, comedian Tony Heathcliff referred to Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean. He went on to tell the crowd, and these Latinos, they love making babies too. Just know that. They do. They do. What should we do with Tony Heathcliff? Thank you all so much.
All right, next we're transitioning to our poetry finalists. First up we have Julie Elise Landry. Julie's work has appeared in A Minor Magazine, Midway Journal, Vassar Review, and more. She holds an MA in English from the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and she is pursuing an MFA in poetry from the University of New Orleans. In 2023, she received an honorable mention for UNO's Vassar Miller Poetry Award. She serves as an associate poetry editor for Bayou Magazine and as the MC for Silver Room, UNO's virtual reading series. Give it up for Julie.
Oh my God, what a fantastic way to spend a Friday. These are excellent writers. Thank you all so much. I'm particularly excited to read this poem. People who have been hanging out with me for a couple of years know that this is one of my lizard poems. I grew up with a severe lizard phobia, which made my life in Louisiana rather complicated. But 10 years ago, I finally sought treatment, and this poem is about how my relationship with lizards has changed. How to learn about lizards after a phobia. Scroll past rows of breeding anoles to stories about New Orleans wars between our locals and the transplants. Hum sometimes while you read. Relax the ciliary muscles in your eyes, the propulsive hair in your eyes, before you regard the red open mouths that hardly shudder your throat anymore. When you venture to confirm the mouths, yes, were the red you remember. The nausea is old programming, a symptom of software decay. No, do not download the free booklet depicting 3-chambered hearts and forget the heinous phrase microscopic hooks while you cough to release your own tension. Learn what you could never know, that green garden lizards are technically venomous, though harmless to humans. And notice that you think them, yes, sweet. Pause on a picture and breathe in relief of unlocked doors shut too long to you becoming open windows that toggle dark to light. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have one of our runners-up, Nat whose piece on the trampoline was chosen by Andy Young as a runner-up. Nat is a poet and writer. Their poems have appeared in the LMNL anthology, Queer South Scene, Saints and Sinners Poetry 2024, Know Your Review, Bayou Review, Snapdragon's Anthology, and has been recognized with a listed Portugal residency from Disquiet 2025.
Born and raised in rural Missouri, she currently lives in New Orleans on a street where wild chickens roam. Give it up for Nat.
All right, thank you all so much for being here. It is such a gift to be in this space with you all and to be with Julie and Daniel. And I've heard both the pieces that you all, it's awesome. I love it, so it's really wonderful. Thank you to LMNL, Nikki, and Word and Music. This is my poetry support dog, Prudence. All right, on the trampoline. Wearing running shoes while I still crawled, though I am 5 years older, adulthood thrust itself between my legs, loved growing up like a long-term lover, collecting chips of New York City pavement in the soles, grabbed a fistful of cloud, dreams, a plump of cumulus. Mrs. Lee handed back my test and said, I expected better. Conversations began in my head, useless, changed a report card, applied to the dream college, forehead gushing blood, running all the bases, faster than coagulation, dust billowed while driving mom's car down the hill, straight into the shed, leaving the license plate imprinted. Our bodies flew through the air above the trampoline, higher than the evergreens, bringing the afraid parts of me courage to skip barefoot across the world, stand on balconies, waiting to jump. Thank you all so very much.
Look at this amazing environment community we have. I've got a baby on stage, I've got a dog on stage, this is great. I'm actually just here to introduce Andy Young, who is our judge for this year's poetry contest, who will introduce this year's winner. Give it up for Andy Young.
Hey y'all. So Daniel Lee's poem, Confession to Gaza on Lyrical Poetics, is a poem generous in heart and ambitious in scope. The poem is rooted in our current political and historical context, but it stretches beyond it to contemplate timeless themes of war, complicity, and the poetics of witness. I carry in my pocket a list of words synonymous with destruction. The poem begins, setting up the poem's project to both name the horrors at hand and question the impossible goal of doing so. Why must your imperious bravery or improbable joy get laundered through mine, the poem asks, even as it details the speaker's own history and sets it against the destruction being witnessed. As the poem grapples with such philosophical concepts, it does not fall into pedantry or abstraction. With lines like, I do not love any land so elementally to be unmothered for it. The language is felt and visceral, both bringing the reader into the poem's experience and implicating the speaker who tries to contain it. Forgive me, please, for these poems, the poem asks, poignantly distilling the poet's conundrum of attempting to sing in the dark times. Daniel W.K. Lee is a third-generation refugee, queer, Cantonese American born in Kuching, Malaysia. He earned his MFA in creative writing at the New School, and his debut collection of poetry, Anatomy of Want, was published by Queer Mojo Rebel Satori Press. He lives in New Orleans with his whippet, Camden. It's my pleasure to bring you up to the stage.
Thank you, Mandy and Nikki and Megan for everything. I'm actually going to start off with this poem, Mercy, which happened to be a finalist as well, so thank you to the readers. One thing to know in this poem, Zatari is a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan. Mercy. How grateful I am that he will never learn his sobs did not sound the same in every ear, that his begging for bread was too Syrian to warrant saving, that even if his fingers, tapping his ribs, rustling against a sheet, smashed the air like a warplane, his not yet 3-year-old frame would still earn death's cool coin. How glad I am that the milk I no longer make cannot prolong his agony of living in defiance against the will of Allah, as though a speck of sand could overwhelm an ocean. Is it just here in Zatari, where surrender is the prerequisite for reprieve, where comfort is a mirage cropped by camera angle? I become intoxicated by grief in a panorama of shattered flame. Thank you, my son, eyes of my soul, for saving me from burning. A confession to Gaza on lyrical poetics starts with the epigram. A few weeks ago, I decided the time had come to part with my little treasure. I gave that single date to my mom. The next morning, she passed it to my youngest sister, Nesma. And then Nesma gave it to our 2-year-old nephew, Moment. Assam al-Nabe on the last dry date in Gaza. I carry in my pocket a list of words synonymous with destruction. I'm trying to write about you without visiting it. Attest to what the occupation does, as though it were my own skin, my own kin, my own orchard, well, wounds. For a poem to arouse sympathy, isn't it a garish demand to center stage one's own artifacts of pain like an illuminated curio for a tardy, flowering rage or lifted finger? 3 generations of my family fumigated across continents by war's fallout, yet there is no comparison. Never burdened to earn grains of mercy, to remain a people indigenous to dignity. Not once a breath, a rib, a gaze or cheek, a defiance, a dream, a choice or life, vandalized and accessorized to impersonate a suicide. Our bloodlines, suspicioned and scapegoated too, needed no story like that of the last dry date in your poem, of its precious sweetness, gifted and gifted and gifted like a blessing, a fable of God weeping kindness to persuade the world of our humanness. Why must your imperious bravery or improbable joy get laundered through mine? I do not love any land so elementally to be unmothered for it. I do not love anything to sacredness that can love like this. Forgive me, please, for these poems I've wielded, wedded with second-hand witness of your smoldering children and your unkillable heart. Let them unspare your oppressors in your ancient name and become archaeological. One day, unearthed and ardent haunting. We were not all always against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Andy.
We're down to our last 2 readers. We're officially moving into our fiction section. So So our next reader, Ariadne Blade, is a New Orleans-based author and playwright. Her debut novel, Ash Tuesday, is out from Indie Press April Clothing. Her short fiction has won the Tennessee Million Saints and Sinners Fiction Contest and the Quantum Shorts People's Choice Prize. Was runner-up for the 2024 Patty Friedmann Fiction Competition and has been published in various anthologies. Her play, The Other Room, is performed internationally. She writes speculative fiction, historical fiction, and work focusing on social and environmental justice. Ariadne moonlights as a ghost tour guide in the French Quarter. Give it up for Ariadne.
Hello, everyone. So I have a question for you because I know some of you are not from Louisiana or don't live here. Do y'all know what nutria are? Yes? Okay, I'll explain real quickly for anyone who's from a more normal part of the country. So nutria are kind of these fat little rodents. They're about the size of the beavers. People hate them here because they're an invasive species, right? They were actually introduced to Louisiana in like the 60s or 70s by men, and they are very destructive to the marsh. Obviously, wetlands are really important in this state, and they're disappearing very quickly. Nutria have actually destroyed, it's estimated, about 100,000 acres of wetlands since they were introduced. Anybody want to guess what species has actually destroyed more wetland than that? Humans! This species is called the invasive activities of a certain species of mammal. It was a brilliant day at the beginning of spring, and Mother had just given birth. Oh, how time flies, she thought as she nursed. The winter had been difficult, as always, but now there were marigolds blooming along the edge of the marsh, and the breeze was warm and inviting. And if you looked closely, you could see tadpoles darting under the surface of the sun-warmed water. It made Mother happy to know that she had contributed to this shift by bringing new life into the world. It was her first pregnancy, and now, like all mothers, she'd taken her place in life's great cycle, the circle of no beginning and no end. She waited with her babies in the nursery until the sun dimmed, then led them out into the world. The water glowed with orange light as they slipped down the shore into it and paddled along the bank, brushing through algae flats and schools of minnows, until they arrived at the fresh expanse of vegetation she started gnawing on a few days before. Mother's babies crowded around her as she showed them how to rip the plants from the ground and break the stalks with their sharp orange teeth, then root down below and tear through the soil to find fleshy rhizomes and dense tubers. Until well after midnight, they gorged themselves on the marsh. When they were finished, the children's bellies were so full that they struggled to waddle back down to the water's edge. Mother laughed, knowing they'd be hungry again soon enough. Father was back at the den by the time they arrived. The children crowded around him, and he laughed and nipped at the young ones, delighted to have a new litter around. Such fine, thick coats you have, Father told them, and what beautiful long tails. Soon the sky grew light, and it was time to sleep. Mother and Father bedded down next to the children, and together their bodies made a tight pile of damp fur. Eventually, the little ones' breathing slowed, and they fell asleep, safe and warm in the protective circle of the adults. Mother nuzzled Father's strong back with her snout, feeling proud of her children and her mate. Father was one of the largest nutria in the marsh, sleek-coated and sharp-toothed, and she knew that all the children she made with him would grow to be especially fat and strong. As she drifted off, her belly full and her family pressed in close all around, she gave thanks for her many blessings. "Let's go," Mom called through the screen door into the yard where the kids were hanging around the busting plastic swing set that they'd outgrown years ago. "I told y'all I wanted us ready by 5. Her daughter was crammed into one of the 2 small swings looking at her phone, and her youngest, the boy, was throwing rocks at the slide and watching her tumble down. "Come on, y'all," she shouted again after a minute, trying not to lose her patience. "This is family time. The water's calling." Her son pitched his last rock at the fence and came in with his shoulders sagging, letting the screen door bang behind him. He didn't like going out on the boat, but knew it was pointless to complain, didn't even bother arguing. His daddy had been that way too, just accepted most things with a shrug and a sigh, whereas her daughter was more like her, stubborn and feisty. Mom called her name, a warning edging. "Just a second," her daughter yelled back from the swing set. The bad attitude had gotten a lot worse in the last few months, but could you blame her? The kids were just doing their best to put one foot in front of the other, same as Mom was. She got the kids out of the house, squeezed them into the cab of the truck, and drove them through town to the edge of the bayou where her old airboat working girl was docked. It bobbed lopsided in the water next to what had used to be Krabby Mike's restaurant before the storm. Mike was retired now, hadn't bothered rebuilding from scratch for the 3rd time in 2 decades, and he let her keep the boat there. Mom unwedged their 3 pairs of mud boots from the gap between the truck bed and the cab and tossed them at the kids. "Mine don't fit anymore," the girl complained as she pulled hers on. She was shooting up in a weed.
Better get you some tails tonight then. Mom said new boots are $24.99. So I need like 4 rats? Technically 5, said the boy, and the girl repeated, technically 5. Ever since their dad's funeral, they've been mean as snakes to each other. It's clear, the boy called from the back of the boat, checking the prop like always. Mom loaded up the electric pump and hit the starter, then added a couple pumps to the accelerator. Working girl had been in her family for decades, needed a little extra encouragement now and then. Once the motor was running, she eased the boat out into the bayou and took her slow through the no-wake zone, past the wrecked cans and half-sunk crabbers that got all messed up by Ida 2 years ago, still hadn't been fixed. She watched her daughter looking out, eyes glazed over, thoughts somewhere else. To the kids, this kind of destruction was normal. They'd already seen 2 or 3 big storms since they'd been born, looked right through it. Half a mile down the bayou, they hit the canal. She still felt a gut-deep sadness whenever they went up and down this way. She couldn't help but picture her husband out here, heading out to the rig. This world don't owe me nothing, he always said. Owed nothing and taken everything in the end. But that was how it went for everybody, wasn't it? For him, just a little sooner than most. She picked up speed now that they were out in the canal, the water shining like a big piece of sheet metal in the setting sun. It hadn't always been wide open like this. Back when she was a kid, the canals had all been a good 20 or 30 feet skinnier, but they'd gotten wider over the years as saltwater come in from the Gulf and killed the plants that held the land together. The same places you used to have to push pull through in a pirogue could now take a 25-foot outboard. Mama, look, called the boy, pointing out starboard at a 12-foot gator on the bank. Lazy ass, said his sister. It's dinner time. Ought to be out there eating swamp rats. It sounded like something their dad would say. Mom laughed for a second. Before the sound died on her lips, everything was quiet again except for the motor's rumble. The light was mostly gone by the time they eased the working girl into a grassy nook a little ways off the canal. It had been a couple weeks since they'd tried this spot, and she had a good feeling about it. You think they remember us? Her son asked. Who, the Nutria? Mom said, yeah, like, do they know we want to kill them? No, idiot. They're just dumb rats, said her daughter, holding her gun. She hated Nutria, or maybe she just liked some shooting things. Mom hopped over the edge of the boat and down into the marsh. There was plenty of grass here, but the ground underneath it was soft and mushy, ready to melt into the water just as soon as those roots got ripped up by the Nutria. They waddled around chowing down with those nasty orange teeth like they owned the place. The problem was, they did. She mucked around for a minute, switching the reeds with her arms and clapping, hoping to drive some out. There was almost certainly a bunch of them in the area. They liked to come out and eat around sunset. It was just a question of getting them agitated enough to show themselves. There, the girl hissed, raising the shadowy shape of the rifle to her shoulder. Mom followed her gaze about 50 feet away to a dark spot snuffling around a clump of grass. Mom took a few steps back to give her plenty of space. Go. The crack of the rifle split the quiet air and the Nutria started running. Damn it, get back here, the girl hissed, and her eyes went narrow and cold as she aimed again. Another way she was like her mom. Messing up has made her meaner, more determined. On the second shot, she didn't miss. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana. All right, our last reader for today is the runner-up in this year's 2025 Patty Friedmann Fiction Contest and was selected by Jennings, who unfortunately could not be here today because he is in Chicago. He did want me to tell you, Marlana, that this was one of the hardest decisions. It was like choosing between the winner and the runner, and he went back and forth so many times. It's a blind contest, so he doesn't, you know, when our judges pick, they don't know. But he said that either way, he would have had, like, feelings, strong feelings about it. Anyway, so you're the runner-up, but you were in many iterations of the universe and our multiverse, the winner. So I just wanted you to know that Alex strongly felt that way. Marlana Botnick-Fireman, she/they, is a queer and Jewish writer and editor in New Orleans. She completed her MFA in creative writing at the University of New Orleans, where she was awarded the Joanna League Prize for Fiction Thesis. Marlana's work can be found in the Southeast Review, Wrecking Review, the Hoogly Review, Side Girl Diaries, and elsewhere. They are a former associate fiction editor for Bayou Magazine. Marlana was born and raised in Central Ohio. When not reading or writing, Marlana can be found crafting with their partner or playing with their goofy dog, Dill. Give it up for Marlana.
This is part of my act. Microphone. Okay. Thank you for having me. My name is Marlena. I'm just going to read the beginning of the story. out of date. With my parents on vacation for a month, it feels more like a model unit than an actual home. All the real-life objects, toothbrushes, dirty dishes, countertop junk mail are gone. What was once my quintessential teenage bedroom is now an exercise room. My softball trophies and Dean's List certificates are dwarfed by a giant rowing machine, a treadmill, a stair stepper. The wall that was once covered in movie posters and record sleeves is now a floor-to-ceiling mirror. The double bed from my teenage years was replaced with a twin bed to make room for the step boss. There is a note from my mom on the bed. Feel free to use any of the equipment, with 2 smiling emojis. Being here feels worse when I know that there's nowhere else for me to go. I told my ex that she could keep the apartment. So am I house sitting or am I conveniently staying at my parents' house with my cat while they're on vacation because I'm homeless? I flop onto the bed and open my phone, intent on bookmarking a few available apartments, but I end up on TikTok anyway, which I am too old for. The app has been telling me that I need a sexy treadmill workout. No, a faja. No, tummy control jeans. No, a hot girl walk, at least 10,000 steps. No, agave syrup in place of sugar. Yes, it's an apron belly. No, wait, is it a bee belly? I closed my phone again. It's all ads anyway. On the kitchen table, there is a food delivery gift card and a list of my parents' favorite local restaurants, places with names like Smoothie Sailing and the Salad Bowl. Next to the list is a brand new smartwatch still in its box. My mom video calls me and she grins, wearing Bud Light glasses on the beach. When I extend my phone away from me to show her that I'm in the kitchen, she puts her hand to her mouth and tells me that I look different. I'm going through a breakup, I remind her. No, that's not it, she says. She informs me that the smartwatch is for me, that tracking steps is fun and helpful for people who are goal-oriented like us. My stepdad waves to me from the background and hands Mom a cocktail, which she sips with a guilty smile. How bad it is of her to drink in the first place, she says. There are tons of snacks in the pantry, she says, help yourself. I tell her I love her and call her mommy even though she can't take her eyes off my chin. Digging around in the pantry, the food might as well be cardboard. High protein, keto, zero sugar health foods, all sprinkled with nutritional yeast and distant memories of flavor. Shoved behind the empty bread box is a spiral-bound book the size of my hand. It catches my eye, so I set it aside and begin scratching out a bare grocery list. I have no motivation to cook. Any moment alone with my thoughts sends me into a spiral. I need to find a new apartment, a new job, a way of being that doesn't feel like getting slowly crushed by the world around me. I watch videos on my phone just to wait for the ramen to cook in the microwave. 4.5 minutes. 4.5 minutes and you can't even stand the silence for that long, the voice in my head tells me, while I fire up my video game, an island that I personalize with animal villagers, their tiny houses and virtual vegetable gardens. A framed photo of my mom and stepdad watches from the mantle, so I turn it face down to squirt hot sauce into the bowl and enjoy my ramen in peace. Then I punch the console's button, sound up, sound up, sound up. I wake up on the couch, phone and gaming console dead, cat sneezing on my belly. What's so wrong with this, I wonder? A soft, warm place for a cat to sleep soundly. Then I remember the smartwatch on the counter and the keto-friendly cookies in the pantry. The way my mother put her hand to her mouth, the way she looked at me, making me want to shrink into a whisk. Over my coffee, I rediscover the book. The Circleville Crochet Club presents The Ladies' Cookbook, Circleville, Ohio. Absent-mindedly, I flick through, carefully separating the yellow pages with my fingertips. The recipes typewritten are each attributed to a different person with a quick blurb about the recipe or its origin. It's different from the explanations accompanying online recipes, the ones everyone hates, that drone on like a novel for paragraphs with the recipe hidden all the way at the bottom. No, these are simple, concise, and charming. These icebox rolls can be converted into a sweet dessert or a savory panache. Struggles with your in-laws be damned. These rolls will surprise the pickiest of eaters. They can be kept simple or dressed up depending on your taste and your audience. If you ask me, your taste is more important. I consider when I stopped cooking for myself. When my ex and I moved in together, I cooked every day. Homemade breads, beef Wellington from scratch, a
recipe from my friend's Indian mother, a photo of a handwritten recipe sent via text message. My former sister-in-law's Karen's gumbo, latkes from Juke-ish, a cookbook, and then it all stopped. Can we lay off the cream-heavy recipes, my ex had asked. Maybe bake less bread, they added when I couldn't button my jeans. There was a loaf of milk bread cooling on the counter just then. My ex left for work and I pulled a piece of the loaf off of my fingers, munching fluffy tearaway pieces while I walked down the driveway to toss the rest of the loaf into the garbage can. Fluffy enough to dry your tears with, the recipe had said. The milk bread soaked up trash juice at the bottom of the can, and I wondered why I didn't just buy bigger jeans. The baking wasn't the reason we broke up, but I did after a while start baking only in the privacy of the house when it was empty, baking and eating and cleaning all in a period of time when my ex left for work and before she returned. For meals, we mainly subsisted on low-calorie frozen entrees that could be warmed in a microwave or convection oven. It was true that these meals made me lose a little weight, but as the calories dwindled, so did my joy. It's a part of me, I tell my mother on the phone. I miss it. It's just food, my mother responds. You need it to survive, you don't need it for joy. That's not what it's for. Maybe it is, I say. Well, it can't be your only joy, Ruby. It's not healthy. I ask, do people say that to chefs? That their careers aren't healthy? You're not a chef, my mother tells me. Graham said I was good enough. Graham said I was the best cook in the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlena. Thank you all for being here. That officially concludes our reading of this year's winners and finalists. The contest next year will open in May and close in October, and then we'll do this all again with next year's winners and finalists. And I'm also pleased to announce that Anna Moon is the winner of our gift card drawing that we held earlier, so please see Megan Holt in the back to receive your community bookstore gift card. Thank you all so much. Have an incredible Words and Music Festival.